Going live?
We are live.
We are live.
Hello, everybody. What's up, YouTube?
Hi, everybody.
How we doing today? I see we got Rez, Vader's Girl, Danny, RFB, 2med2. Pretty good crowd so far.
Yes, indeed. We're glad to have everybody.
Hopefully everyone hit that like button so far already. Stephen Miller's there. Good. Welcome. Good Saturday to you, too.
I know that Brittany and Sydney are in the pool, but they're going to be listening in as well.
Oh, that's
So,
a good day for the
yes.
poll around here.
Yeah. Pretty hot one out there today.
It is. Very well. Good. Good to hear that, RFB. Glad you're having a good Saturday. I woke up around 9 and then took a nap.
Yeah, I should probably like trim this thing, but I do appreciate that my beard is looking impressive. I
Yep.
appreciate that. I work hard to at least. I don't want it to get out of control, but I do like the beard.
Yeah, there's Brittany. Hi, Brittany.
Hi, Brittany and Sydney.
Red 5 Network signing in. I'm guessing that's Ro. How we doing today? All right. Cool. Welcome, Ro. Thanks for stopping in. We appreciate it. All right. Let's start the recording. And I think we can get ready to kick off here pretty soon.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Let's give it another couple seconds just to make sure there's a little bit of a buffer there, so I don't have to fix it later. Seems like when I'm streaming from the software and recording from the same software, it cuts off part of the recording, so.
Gotcha.
Just to be safe. All right. You're ready? I'll hit the intro.
I'm ready.
Oh, as soon as Cam shows up, we're going to have to tell him happy birthday.
Okay. Sounds good.
This podcast is part of the Red 5 Network. For more Red 5 Network podcasts, visit red5network.com.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
Hello there, everyone out in the galaxy. This is episode 38 of the From a Certain Point of View podcast. I am Josh.
I'm Adam.
And we are excited to be talking Star Wars once again today. And Adam, I'm going to do something new right off the bat here.
Okay.
Instead of just
it.
asking you what you've been watching and playing in Star Wars, I'm
Mhm.
just going to ask you in general. It doesn't have to be
Rather than
Star
okay,
Wars.
okay.
What have you been watching and playing this week?
Okay, so well, I'll start off with a couple Star Wars things. First, been watching Revenge of the Sith for our episode today, getting ready for that. Second, I don't know if you remember a few months ago, really, I bought Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast on Switch,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't like it. And
Right.
I finished that this week. I pushed through it, and I remember that on GameCube being so much better than it was, and I don't know if it's just the way they updated it. I don't know, but it was frustrating. It was rough, but I got to the end of it. So I don't have to touch that on Switch ever again. And then after that, I've been doing some different things this week. We talked last week about watching Hamilton, and that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of got me on a history kick. So I've been doing some. I finished watching a series called Turn on Netflix, which was an AMC series about spies during the Revolutionary War, and that is a great show. So if anyone has Netflix out there, wants a good historical drama, Turn is a great place to is a great show to check out. and just started doing a little bit of reading. So kind of some more historical stuff around that
Hmm.
same time period. So it's kind of Hamilton has sparked me into sent me down a rabbit hole, I guess.
Yeah, I hear you there. I mean, even when we were going down to Virginia Beach for our little mini vacation earlier in the summer, they had like Yorktown was down there
Oh
and
yeah,
everything, and
right,
like
right.
they have like these museums that
Hmm.
unfortunately weren't open at the time, but like I really wanted to go. Like I was so interested in the historical stuff, so I might have to.
Yeah.
I know I added Turn to my watch list on Netflix, so
Oh, I
um,
highly recommend it. It's very
yeah,
good.
yes,
And yeah, but I was been thinking the same thing about vacations. My brother lives out in the Philly, New Jersey area, so there's a lot of
hmm,
stuff from that period over there. And,
yep.
Valley Forge Museum is over there, that type of stuff. So yeah, definitely been thinking about checking out some of those historical sites. So but yeah, that was basically my week.
Some interesting stuff.
What have you been up to?
Well, I of course, like you, watched Revenge of the Sith the past couple days,
Hmm.
and getting ready for today's show. And I did watch an episode or two of Rebels this week.
Okay.
See, I'm going slowly through that. I need to get back into it because I've been watching The Last Dance on the ESPN app, which chronicles the Chicago Bulls during
Oh
the
yeah, yeah. Okay.
1990s. It focuses a lot on Michael Jordan and
Right.
in the whole Bulls team, but it was it's one of the best kind of docu series that I've seen, especially as far as sports goes. So I definitely recommend that
Nice.
one. Hmm.
Forgot what that was called, but I remember that being out. I should check that out.
Yeah, it's excellent.
Yeah.
But oh, we have some Chicago. Do we have a
Yeah,
Chicagoan
Rose. Yeah,
in the
Rose from the
house? Yeah,
Chicago. Yep. Yep.
nice, nice. Yeah. Um, And I think we're going to move on to some polls that we had this week. The first one
Yeah.
I want to bring up because I already saw in the chat about Cam being busy
I was
eating
gonna do the same thing.
pineapple pizza right now. I want to
Yeah.
bring up the great pineapple debate um, that has been going on Twitter about pineapple pizza. What was the final result of that? Because there was a couple
So
polls
the one
about.
that Rez did it came out tie. It was tied. There's
Mhm.
the yes 100% option and the put it. I think it was called put it in the garbage or something like that.
Right.
Those two tied, and then there was
Yes.
another like 18% or something that said it depends.
Yeah, I mean, I
So
went with it depends just because, like I said, if there's ham on the pizza, then I will take pineapple on it as well. But if there's no ham, then we have a hashtag the Great Pineapple Debate going on here in the chat as well. But then there was a second poll where there
there
was
was
just only
another
two
one.
options. There was either
Yes
like
and no. Yep.
yes or no. So
And guess what happens when you do yes or no?
I think probably pineapple
Yes
won out
wins.
there.
It did.
Yeah, yeah. So.
uh, Cam's gonna love this whenever he
Yeah, we're
listens.
thinking about you, Cam, as we talk about this. But moving
Happy
on to
birthday, by the way.
yes, happy
This is
birthday
Cam's birthday,
to
the day
Cam.
that we're recording. So wish
Hmm.
our great friend Cam Ray a happy birthday.
And
May
we
it be
also
filled with pineapple.
conducted, yes, may it be blessed and filled with pineapples. So we also had a weekly poll that we did about Attack of the Clones, and the poll was who gave the best performance in episode 2, acting performance. And we had Ewan McGregor, Hayden Christensen, Natalie Portman, and Christopher Lee. Those were the reason I used those actors. They were the top 4 build cast when I looked on IMDb, and Ewan McGregor won this one with 53%. Natalie Portman came in third with 13%. Christopher Lee at 31% in second place, and last was Hayden Christensen.
Poor
Um,
Hayden.
poor Hayden, but I went with Christopher Lee on this one
Oh,
just
interesting.
because
Okay.
I thought, because for me, Ewan McGregor's performance in Revenge of the Sith for me is my favorite. I think he absolutely knocks it out of the park, and we're going to
Yeah.
talk about how he gets closer and closer to feeling like
Yeah.
the Alec Guinness
Hmm.
Obi-Wan. Um, but Christopher Lee in Attack of the Clones, I thought he played just such a convincing villain,
Yeah, he
and
did.
kind of a different type of villain. Um, so yeah, that's what I went with.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm sure you went with Ewan.
Yeah. It's for you,
Yeah,
and for me, it's
yeah,
you, and yeah.
yes.
So
So that was our poll, and Adam is going to tell us what's going on this week's show.
We got some news this week. Actually, probably a healthy bit of news, more than we've had
Good
the last
amount.
couple of weeks. Yeah. So we got some news to go over, and then we are jumping in. We're rounding out the prequel trilogy this week with our Thank the Maker series. So we're going to be talking about Revenge of the Sith, and right now I'll throw out a teaser for next week. We're going to step away from Thank the Maker for a week, and we're going to do a psychology of episode. We're going to do the psychology of Anakin Skywalker, and we're actually going to do that in 2 parts. So next week we're going to take a look at the psychology of Anakin as it stands after the prequels, and then we'll jump into the sequel to the original trilogy, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
We'll jump into the original trilogy, and then after that we'll do a second part of Anakin, and look at his psychology as it stands after 4, 5, and 6. So, this week is Thank the Maker, and if you're ready, let's jump into news.
Let's do it. Punch it.
Well, you want the bad news or the really bad news?
So we're going to start out with some movie news this week, and we're talking about The Empire Strikes Back. For the first time in 23 years, and this is coming from Star Wars Newsnet, and for the third time since its initial release 40 years ago, The Empire Strikes Back has won the #1 spot at the box office this past weekend in the United States. That would be last weekend. So I thought this was pretty remarkable. So it's the third time
really
that it was
cool news,
the
yeah.
#1. It earned an estimated $175,000 at 483 locations and that would have been last Friday. And then it was estimated that it would win the weekend between 400,000 and 500,000. So I just thought this was kind of interesting. We didn't get to see The Empire Strikes Back because our Cinemark theater that was supposed to open has not opened.
Yep.
And
I was really frustrated by that. To be honest,
right.
I was frustrated most of the week by that, but
for
I was
sure.
really
So I'm
hoping
not
to get out and see not just Empire, but there's a lot of those movies I wanted to get out and see in the theater, and don't know if I'll get that chance, but hopefully.
right. Yeah, so we'll have to keep an eye on our Cinemark and see when that's going to be opening. I don't know of any local theaters that are open right now aside from the drive-in theaters, which actually contribute to about a third of the 1,000 or so theaters open in the US and Canada right now. So there's that. But any other thoughts on the Empire winning last weekend's box office?
No, it's just really cool to see Empire taking over the box office one more time, and doesn't happen very often. But it's cool that unexpected, but it was cool that it got a chance to rise to the top one more time.
Absolutely. And moving on to TV, we had a kind of a big announcement this week on the 13th, and it comes from StarWars.com. Disney Plus ordered its next animated series from Lucasfilm, Star Wars: The Bad Batch. Will be hitting Disney Plus in 2021, and the series follows the elite and experimental clones of the Bad Batch as they find their way in a rapidly changing galaxy in the immediate aftermath of the Clone War. So what are your thoughts on a Bad Batch series?
I'm excited for the possibilities. Especially having this take place after the Clone Wars. I'm more excited for that possibility that it could fill in some gaps, specifically what happened with some clones and between where they ended after the Clone Wars and where they pick up again in Rebels. That type of thing. I'm excited to fill in that time period. If this was during the Clone Wars, I wouldn't be as thrilled with it, but yeah, the possibility that this can fill in some story there and add some stuff, that's what I'm most excited about, I think.
Yeah, I think my initial reaction to this news was that, of course I'm going to watch it. I wanted to see that Rebels sequel animated show being announced, so I was like slightly disappointed that this is what we got, but I'm still happy and will definitely watch it. And like you said, it could fill in some of those gaps that, you know, and where did the clones go from, you know, episode 3 to Rebels, like you said. So pretty interesting, but I still want to get that Rebels sequel announcement at some point.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm still
definitely,
hoping we're going to
definitely.
see that. That rumor's been going on for a while.
I almost think
So
like because the Bad Batch is coming to Disney Plus, right?
yes.
I almost think like
Hmm.
a Rebels sequel type show would probably go back to like Disney XD or something, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I think they'd go with Disney Plus at this
You think
point.
so?
Yeah, I really I do. I do. I mean,
Maybe.
I know
I think to
Jedi
see
Temple
the only reason
Challenge was kind of an exception,
yeah,
but
right.
um
The only reason I think that is I think with the Bad Batch they'd have their Disney Plus show, and I think
mhm.
a Rebels sequel would kind of be a bigger bill, and I think that would make some cable providers happy that Disney's providing that content for cable subscriptions and things like that. So, um,
Yeah, I don't know what their strategy is going forward in terms of what they're going to release on a cable channel
right, right,
versus the streaming service, but I imagine they're putting all their efforts into this streaming service and putting all their new content there. That's um where I would lean, but I'm not sure.
could be.
Yeah. And we have a little bit more news in the world of TV as well, and there was Alden Ehrenreich was on a podcast, and
Hmm.
um, the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast, and they were talking about his new Peacock streaming series, Brave New World. And for about the last 5 minutes of that podcast, they talked about Solo and a possible sequel. And he was asked if he'd be interested in coming back to play Han Solo again on Disney Plus or in any way, and he said he would. He said I would. He said it would have to be the right version of it, and he goes on to say that I think now they're being so inventive with how they're using Star Wars and putting out stories in a different way that maybe I could see some out of the box, interesting iteration of it somewhere. We'll see. Who knows? Um, so, what do you take from these quotes, Adam?
I see in the chat we have some make Solo 2 happen hashtags. I just think that's in some form or fashion. I hope this news ends up contributing to that eventually. In what
Yeah,
form that takes, I don't know. If it's a movie, if it's a Disney Plus series, if it's straight to Disney Plus movie, I don't know. So hopefully that just leaves the door open enough that
yeah.
you know.
Yeah, for me, it's a no-brainer. I mean, I think with Disney Plus and what they can do with the TV series now, especially after what we got with The Mandalorian, I think that you almost have to pick up the story that Solo left off. I mean, Alden somewhere in the interview talks about how at the end of Solo, Han Solo's character gets to that point where he's starting to become that Han Solo that we know. Um, and I think being able to see his interactions with Jabba the Hutt potentially, or um, did he meet up with Boba Fett, or have a confrontation with Boba Fett before the Empire Strikes Back and everything?
Yeah,
Um,
right, right.
some Lando stuff, how he maybe came to run Cloud City, basically, all those types of things. I think there's a lot of, and of course, Crimson Dawn, Darth Maul, Kira. I think there's a lot of open threads where you could take that series. So
Yeah,
I'd
absolutely.
I'd love to see it.
Yeah, Kira and Crimson Dawn is that's a story that has to get told, I think.
Hmm.
So
So I'm definitely hoping to see that on Disney Plus someday. And moving on to some gaming news, we have a new one from ILM X Lab. This is going to be a VR experience, and it's going to be centered around the location of Batu. And it says they're quoted as saying, "We're so excited for fans to step into Star Wars Tales from the Galaxy's Edge later this year. This action packed adventure not only speaks to the promise of connected and complementary experiences by extending the lore around Black Spire Outpost, It represents another meaningful step in ILMX Lab's quest to transition from storytelling to story living, where you're inside the world making choices that drive your experience forward. So, what are your thoughts on this, Adam?
Um,
I think they're, by the way, teaming up with Oculus for this
yeah,
as
yeah.
well. Yeah.
I'm excited for this. I can't help it. Like, I think that this came out earlier. I remember hearing something about this, and I don't know if it was a like a leak or something. I don't know, but I feel like this is one that I've seen before somewhere. I don't know why, but
hmm
uh, basically, it just makes me want some type of VR solution even more because
I hear you with,
with
especially
this
now that it's Star Wars is tapping into that, you know?
a lot because of this,
hmm
and then I've never checked out Vader Immortal, and then
Right.
the Squadrons is going to be fully VR
hmm
capable. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I
That's
guess there's going to be. It said there in the article somewhere that there will be like it's going to be a lot of different
hmm
types of. I don't know how to say it exactly. Um, it's not going to be just one type of game. There are different strategies you'll have to use
yeah,
and different
right,
different
right.
types of gaming within the game. You know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a couple $100 I didn't want to spend, and wasn't planning on spending, but I may have to figure out a way I can spend it. So.
Yeah, might be something we have to look into. Maybe we can team up and
Oh yeah, there you go.
split the
Go
cost and
halvesies. Yeah.
share. Yeah, yeah. Um,
Not share the headset at the same time, right?
no,
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 okay,
no,
all right. Because I
no.
don't.
It would have
I'll
to
pass
be.
on that if that's the
Yeah,
if
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
plan.
yeah. No, alternate. You know.
Okay, all right. We'll
Um,
take turns.
and finally, moving on to some convention news, we have a couple pieces of information to get out to you. San Diego Comic Con at home is something that's going to be happening on YouTube. And Star Wars has some involvement in this San Diego Comic Con at home, and a lot of that's going to take place next Friday, July 24th. There are gonna be 4 Star Wars panels from fans and creatives. Um, First up is the Mandalorian and his many gadgets. So we have some experts that are going to be looking at technologies that are explored in the Mandalorian, from tracking fobs and jetpacks to wrist rockets and flamethrowers, examining the most well-equipped bounty hunter in the galaxy. That's going to take place at 10 a.m. on Friday, uh, Pacific time. And then we have Star Wars audiobooks, Dr. Aphra. So we're going to get the inside scoop on the audiobook, original Dr. Aphra. And there will be we're going to be hearing from the audiobook narrators as well for that one. And that one's going to take place at 11 a.m. Then we have Lucasfilm Publishing, Stories from a Galaxy Far, Far Away. So we're going to have some authors such as Timothy Zahn, Alex Segura, Justina Ireland, and more that will be talking about publishing. I'm assuming there might be some focus on the High Republic era during that panel. That one's going to happen at 12 p.m. Pacific time. And finally, this is interesting, the psychology of Star Trek versus Star Wars. So they stole our idea, obviously.
How dare
Um,
they? That was like
but
that was like the one original idea I thought we had. It's gone.
Yeah. So they're going to do the psychology of Star Trek versus Star Wars, looking at, kind of some of the psychology behind um, Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. They're going to be looking at possibly like Picard as well, Discovery. Yeah, so it'll be Discovery, Picard, and Rise of Skywalker. And that's going to take place at 2 p.m. on Friday, July 24th. So that's
Awesome.
San Diego Comic Con at home. And I know you had something you wanted to talk about as well.
Yeah, actually, I've got a couple of things here. First of all, tomorrow is good friends of the network, good friends of the channel, and also our good Red 5 network friends, Scarif Scuttlebutt is having a Scarif Con tomorrow. That's all day, Sunday, tomorrow throughout the day. But then they're having Dominic Pace on at 2:15, and I do believe that that's Central Time. But Rose here, he can correct me if I'm wrong. So tomorrow, check that out. Make sure you're following Scarif Scuttlebutt, Red 5 Network, all those places, so you can hear all about it. But yeah, tomorrow throughout the day is Scarif Con, and then, like I said, Dominic Pace at 2:15. Then moving on, we also got an email this week about Force Fest, which is an online convention that's being put together by a number of different podcasts. Force Fest is going to be taking place on August 28th through 30th, and it's going to be on the Get Vocal platform. We'll put some more news out about this later too. But basically, there's going to be a number of different panels and such with different topics, from animation to just having a general cantina where Star Wars fans can hang out and just chat Star Wars. So that's going to be August 28th through 30th, and follow Force Fest on Twitter to find out more about that. So
Awesome.
And Rose clarifying 2 to 5 p.m. tomorrow for Scarif Con.
Very good, very good. Yeah, I mean, this all is making me wonder if Star Wars Celebration is going to have some kind of virtual presence at all.
Yeah, I don't think so.
You think they would have when they canceled it or bumped it back to
Yeah, no,
2022.
especially
I think they would have announced it at that point that if it was
Yeah.
going to be virtual, but it's kind of
especially
disappointing.
since they're already putting out stuff about Bad Batch, TV series and
Yeah,
things like that.
that's probably something they would have announced it.
Yeah, I don't. I
Celebration.
very much don't think that we'll have an online official
Right.
celebration from Lucasfilm. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, that wraps it up for the news this week, and we are ready to dive deep into Revenge of the Sith with our next edition of Thank the Maker.
Thank the Maker. This oil bath is going to feel so good.
So good. Cracking up. All right, so like I said at the top of the show, we're rounding out the prequel trilogy today. Revenge of the Sith is what we're talking about today. Easily my favorite of the prequels, and it's really up there, as far as Star Wars movies in general. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but there are parts of this movie that are just perfect,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, let's just jump into the cast part of this. One of my favorite little anecdotes that I came across, anecdotes, not anecdotes.
It's not an Anakin dote. It's an
Anakin. Is actually about Anakin in some ways. Hayden actually did a lot of, and I think this was Ewan talking about this, but he said he did a lot of working out and getting fit and getting bigger for this role. And then once he was done with the scenes where he didn't have a shirt on, he was done. He never worked out again after that.
That's funny.
That cracked me up. I thought that was a great little story.
That is funny.
But then Ewan again. Let's just talk about him right now. But he had mentioned this was basically his last shot to match up to Alec Guinness's performance. And that's kind of a big bar to set for himself. But something that George actually mentioned was that he increasingly, as these movies went on, likened his performance to Alec. From episode 1 to 2 to 3, and then this was the most like Alec he was going to get to help transition into 4. Right.
Little did he know that would not be his last opportunity to get more. I mean, I imagine in this Obi-Wan series that we're going to get that he could be even more similar to Alec Guinness's Obi-Wan at that point.
Yeah, more Guinnessy at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and really looking back at his performance in this movie, this is easily my favorite performance of his that he's done ever so far. And I haven't seen what he's going to do again, like you said with the Kenobi stuff, but I adore him in this movie, and I mean that very seriously. Just his mannerisms.
He's fantastic.
Yeah, his mannerisms in this movie, and just some of my favorite Obi-Wan moments as well, from "Hello There" to another happy landing, and then every bit of serious, dramatic elements that he had to bring, he just nailed it. It was so well done on his part.
I think especially what really stands out to me in his performance is that final duel between Anakin and Obi-Wan, and when he's talking about his allegiance being to the Republic, to
Yeah,
democracy, and the way that
right.
he yells it with that passion, and then also when their battle's over and he's telling Anakin he was the chosen one and he was supposed to destroy the Sith, not join them. You were my
Mhm.
brother, Anakin. Like that stuff is
Yep.
just so powerful and it gets me every time.
Yep. Danny's in chat, and Danny's brings up two good points. First, that she thinks that ROTS was his best Star Wars performance for sure, and
Mhm.
she says he was also amazing in Train Spotting. And then she says when she thinks of of Obi-Wan, she thinks of Ewan first, and then Alec in a second.
Yeah,
And
I kind of I
I
kind of agree
agree.
with that.
I
Yeah.
agree with that. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um. So yeah. Moving on from Ewan real quick. Natalie Portman talks about Padme. Well, kind of moving on from Ewan.
Hmm.
Um. Natalie Portman talks about Padme and Obi-Wan having to grow together off screen because when we leave them at the end of Attack of the Clones, they're familiar but they're not friendly. Uh,
Right.
in this movie, they've become closer as friends, and so they had to kind of convey that, just through acting and dialogue, that relationship has grown in the last, was it 3 years, I think, between
Yeah,
two and three, something like that.
I think there's 3 years between the two, and I thought that was a very interesting point.
Yeah.
Um, that they kind of and I know, and I don't know if they were going to do a little bit more with Anakin being suspicious of Obi-Wan and Padme's relationship than they actually did. But you can kind of sense that when Obi-Wan and Padme show up on Mustafar, that Anakin is kind of angered by the fact that Obi-Wan was with her. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
So
there's almost a
um,
jealousy aspect there,
yeah.
right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, I found this is the second week in a row where I have a Samuel L. Jackson quote, where he says that he thinks that this is the one thing that he'll be remembered for is Mace Windu.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, which is interesting coming from the guy that's going to become
Nick Fury.
Nick Fury in the
Mhm.
Marvel movies.
Mhm.
So do you think that in 20 years, when we talk about Samuel L. Jackson, we'll be talking about Mace Windu?
I do. I think
Okay.
that you know just like we've seen the prequels grow in popularity even
Hmm.
recently, and the embracing of those films and everything, I think even down the road, we'll think of Mace Windu when we think of Samuel L. Jackson. I mean, you might think of Nick Fury first,
Right,
um,
right.
but I think Mace is always going to be part of that conversation too.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Cam, it says Mace gave Ahsoka the shaft. He did.
Yeah.
It's a good pun.
Uh-huh.
And Two Mid 2 says he's got no more love for that Jedi. Um, you know, Mace Windu really is, character wise, has shifted since Clone Wars. That's one of the ways that Clone Wars has kind of influenced Star Wars as a whole, is it's
Mhm.
given more context to those, and where he was kind of just the tough guy Jedi. He's become a little bit more of a, how do I want to say it? Not like hated or despised, but he's become a little
Right.
bit more controversial, I guess. I don't know.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I can see
Interesting.
that.
So,
And by the way, I see Brittany saying in the chat that she remembers him because of the purple lightsaber. I will say that I love the purple lightsaber too.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I dig that purple lightsaber.
yeah. Really, is one of the main other colors aside from red, blue, and green that we
Hmm.
ever get until we get to, like, Ray.
Yeah.
We get a few other ones here and there, obviously, but
Right.
as far as main characters go, it's really the only one that's ever strayed from that
Hmm.
that I can think of anyway.
Yep.
And then the last thing I want to mention with the cast is really actually about Grievous, and Grievous is mainly there to foreshadow what's about to happen to Anakin. That's one of the many little instances that I pulled out as far as foreshadowing and references go in this movie. Grievous is really meant to kind of foreshadow that event. Anakin becoming more machine than man, and
Yeah. I just
having
had that quote
the
in my head
physical
too.
right, having the physical disabilities as far as the cough goes. The cough is one of those things that's kind of supposed to reference the breathing, Vader's breathing later. It's kind of a way to call that back into your conscience. So
Yeah.
but this movie opens with one of my favorite openings, the Battle of Coruscant. Actually, they mentioned that they shot that whole thing in one day, but they had to spend 6 months on the on putting it all together.
Right.
When you talk about putting all of the digital effects into that
So
thing.
so much of it is digital.
Yeah, right.
I mean, aside from shooting Hayden and Ewan in their cockpits and everything, and
Right.
mostly everything else is digital.
Yeah, pretty much.
Mhm.
And I'll mention this again later, but between 1 and 2, you saw some of the tech leaps, and then from 2 to 3, I think you see it again, where so many of the techniques that they used even just a few years prior in Episode 2 have gotten so much better in just that span of time. And they actually had to use in Padme's funeral scene at the end. You see a little bit of Boss Nass, and that's actually the same character model that they used from Episode 1 that they plugged into this. But it looked fine. They talked about being worried about how that would look being an older model, but it actually plugged in and worked fine. But as far as these effects go, I think that it's pretty apparent that they kind of nailed what they even did in Episode 2.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely a step up.
So George mentioned that first shot with the starfighters is probably the longest continuous shot in the saga at that point, and I don't think that there's been one since. So when you talk about single continuous shots, that opening scene with the Anakin and Obi-Wan kind of flying over the it's not a destroyer, it's a Republic. Whatever at that point. Flying over that and then kind of cascading down and revealing all these elements of the battle as they go.
That's a
actually
really
the
cool
longest,
shot.
Yeah, the longest continuous shot of the saga.
Yeah.
So pretty cool stuff. But yeah, that actually, and then there's, I want to get your opinion on this right now. Like that whole sequence is like 20 minutes of the movie. I mean, it's pretty long as far as the battle goes, and was actually much longer. It could have been much longer.
I can't imagine it being longer than it is already. I'm probably in the minority in that I'm not a huge fan of this opening. I love this. I love that first shot and the space battle portion and everything. But I think all the stuff with, I don't know. I just don't love the stuff that I just feel like it kind of is a separate thing to the, and George even said, like, they had to keep it to 20 minutes. It's almost a kind of an opening, and then you get to the real story stuff after they land, basically. You know what I mean? But it feels kind of like a separate thing to me, almost.
Yeah, I can see that.
And I just like the elevator stuff is just silly to me, like the elevator going up and down, and I just don't love that. I don't love that for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I like
George
the
talked
Dooku
about the elevator.
confrontation. But
Yeah, I do too. George talked about the elevator stuff, and there was actually a lot of pressure to have him drop that. But that's one of the things that he held on to. He wanted to keep that.
Right.
And the reason is because that's R2's scene. That's when R2 gets to shine.
Yeah.
So he talked about being one of R2's biggest fans, and that's the reason he wanted to keep that in. But I love it because that's one of the only times on screen you get Anakin and Obi-Wan being the
kind
team,
of bantering and being friends and being
right.
Yeah, I do love that aspect
of it on Geonosis and 2, but this is kind of Anakin and Obi-Wan at the height of their career power,
Mhm.
good guy type thing, and this is, one of the only times you get that on screen. So
I think
that's
there's
really what
just
I love about it.
I think what's hard for me to get past is just some of the stuff that is so apparently digital, CGI. Um, like the whole R2 thing with when he shoots the flames and it lights
Yeah.
up the oil and it just looks fake and it looks animated. And like
Yeah.
even when Dooku like pulls down that one like beam or whatever down onto
Oh,
Obi-Wan.
right,
It just
right.
doesn't look right. It doesn't look real.
Yeah, it
So
doesn't look
like
quite that's the only part of that whole
that
segment
stuff is hard
is
for me to get past. Like
yeah.
I love this movie so much. I love the story. I love
Mhm.
everything. It's just some of those things pull me out of it because I'm
That's
such a
fair.
proponent of practical shooting, location shooting, all those things. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
that's fair.
that's
Yeah,
the
that
tough
part
thing
that
for
you
me.
mentioned with Dooku pulling the platform onto Obi-Wan, that's the only
Hmm.
one out of that whole, and we'll talk about some more because there's more stuff that I didn't even realize. Um,
You're right. Yeah.
that's the only one that ever really actually just takes me out of it a little bit because I can
Hmm.
tell how digitized it is.
Right.
Um, there was some talk about how much George was kind of changing some things up, redoing the Battle of Coruscant, and then specifically that scene right after the battle with the senators. He wanted to change some dialogue and even actually change some of the layout of the scene.
Hmm.
And when you listen to some of the filmmakers talk about that particular scene, they'll say that's the one that took them the longest, that was the hardest, most difficult one, and not just because of George changing things around, but he wanted it to be like noontime, and so getting that lighting right, because you're doing a lot of this lighting and editing really, um, getting that lighting right for a noontime sun, it was so difficult for them, especially when they park the transport in the sun instead of the shade. They have to get that light right then, and
Right.
then they have to deal with all the senators, which were, you know, there's a lot of digitizing going on there, with
Hmm.
characters and stuff. So it, they and two separate audio commentary tracks I listened to. That scene was referenced both times as being the most difficult for them. That took the longest for them to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say one thing about the digital effects, the CGI and everything. I think for the time when it was released, it's
Hmm.
fantastic. And I do want to say that, and I also want to say that I recently watched Terminator: Dark Fate, and some of the when they use CG characters in that movie, I think Revenge of the Sith was more well done than Dark Fate, which just came out. You know what I mean? So
Okay,
I will say that,
that's
like,
interesting. Yeah,
yeah, that's something that took me out of it watching that movie too. Was I was like, man, I was like the Matrix back in the day when they
yeah.
used digital Neo, it looked even better than this looks right now. But I do think Revenge of the Sith for the time that it was made, I think they were doing their best work. And
Yeah, and
most of it stands up, but just a few things take me out of it sometimes.
yeah,
I just want to
I
clarify
think
that.
sure. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
there's definitely a couple things that take me out of it, but I think for the most
Hmm.
part, it's really well. It's actually amazingly well done for some of the stuff we'll talk about later, that I never knew until this past week, was
Hmm.
digitized.
Yeah.
Um, the Battle of Kashyyyk, was shortened also considerably to move the story along, focusing on Anakin's struggle, rather than what's going on with Kashyyyk. Um, I think what I'll say here, there's a lot of loose ends to tie up, in this
Yeah.
movie. There's a lot going on.
And the
Um,
Kashyyyk segment to me did feel like it was a little too short. It felt like it got shortchanged a little bit. I
yeah,
was kind of
okay,
interested in that's one of kind of the battles going on that I
right,
felt like we could have spent just a little bit more time with. Just because
okay,
of course I love Yoda and you got Chewie there and you got the Wookiee home planet.
hmm,
I felt like if I wanted anything to be a little extended, it would have been that.
okay, sounds good. Um, I really enjoyed when Lucas started talking about a little bit of the politics here in this movie. Um, he started discussing about how the rise of empires, and he started talking about it in the frame of mind that power is basically given in more cases than not. Power is for someone who would become an emperor. Power is just basically handed over to them.
Hmm.
So when people don't want anything to do with politics is when they give that power to someone else to clean it up, and that's where Palpatine's able to step in and take advantage of that. Um, take advantage of the Trade Federation, and then his thoughts about how this all happens and comes to be, and how Palpatine rises to power. It's really interesting to hear him talk about that.
Yeah.
When he
Hmm.
goes into that and starts deep diving into what he's thinking, it's really well done.
Yeah,
And I
I
think
think
it's going
I
to hold
think
up
the
for the rest of time. To be honest with you.
yeah, it does hold up, and it's really fascinating.
Hmm.
Palpatine's rise to power and the politics behind all of that is really interesting, and I might not have had the appreciation for it when I was younger that I do now.
Yeah, definitely. I forget who said this. It might have been Rick McCallum, but they were talking about the amount of darkness in the film, and he said he almost wishes that it was totally dark.
Hmm.
Which yeah, I mean, there's really a couple scenes that are like daylight time, with
Yeah.
sunlight there. A lot of the rest of the movie is very dark. Uh,
Okay, so he means literally like lighting, like dark,
he means,
like
yeah,
night versus day, and
right.
um I think one of the more interesting, powerful scenes comes when Anakin is in the Jedi Temple, and there are two windows, and
Hmm.
and he's looking across, kind of, and Padme's across the way in her
Right.
own apartment area, and they're both just kind of like staring out, and Anakin's having this moment of decision of what am I going to do. Am I going to go and rescue Palpatine, who might be able to save Padme, or am I going to stay here like I was told to? And one window has, you can see the sun in that window,
Right.
and the other one is like darker, and he
Hmm.
goes to the darker window. And I don't know if that was intentional and also like foreshadowing his, but I just always thought that was such a beautiful scene.
I would venture with some of the stuff that George said that that was probably very intentional.
Mm, yeah.
But that's my guess. But I would say that that was very intentional.
Hmm.
Let's talk about Udapow.
I love Udapow. It's probably my favorite prequel planet, actually.
Yeah.
For some reason, I
I
just love
agree.
it.
I love Udapow
Yeah.
too. Udapow is one of the planets that I think about when I always wanted the sequels to venture a little bit into more creative territory
Hmm.
with planets and terrain. George talked about when you come up with these worlds, you have to kind of create a culture around it. It's a little more difficult than just coming up with a world.
Hmm.
Um, he always has this way of putting reality into these places, into these stories, and that's probably one of the reasons why it just feels so alive. So many parts of
Yeah.
this world feel so alive, is because he's putting that thought process into it. What are these people? What drives them? Why are they here? What makes them different? What do
Hmm.
they feel is special? And he puts that into every place that he goes to, and it's really amazing when you think about it. He's putting that kind of
Yeah.
care into it. The only other person I can really think of that did that level, I think, of world building is probably Tolkien.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah. With Middle Earth.
right?
Yeah.
With putting a history and building
Hmm.
languages and all that stuff.
Yeah.
George is probably the only other one that I can think of that takes it to that level. And
I would agree.
um, I think you have here about Steven Spielberg did some storyboarding for Udapow, which I never knew.
Yeah. Yeah. I knew Steven Spielberg was back in the day. I had heard that Steven Spielberg was somehow involved with Revenge of the Sith. I
Right,
just didn't
right.
know exactly how. There were rumors that he had come on to write some things, or or something like that. But I guess he did some storyboards for the Udapow battle sequence, which I thought was interesting. George Lucas was like, yeah, well, Steven was a little bored, so He came over and did some storyboards.
uh, he cracks me up sometimes when he talks.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then I mentioned before, this is probably the one chance where we can just kind of talk about this for a while. The last hour of this movie is practically perfect.
I love
think
the
that
last
was
hour.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
that was John Knoll that said that when I wrote that down.
I think the editing especially is fantastic in the
Yeah.
last hour of this film.
Yeah. There's so many places I want to take this part of the discussion, but let's start with um, the one of the main sets that they actually did build was for the Tantive 4. And they reconstructed that, they said, very faithfully from pictures and things of that nature.
Mhm.
George mentioned how strange it was to kind of go back to that set, being it's the first time you ever really meet anything Star Wars is the Tantive 4 on board that ship in the hallway and things like that. So going back to that and recreating that scene, recreating that set, he said was very.
So did they actually build that set for that ship?
From what they said, they recreated that set. Yeah.
Because for me, that's one thing in the film that really looks and feels real to me. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like it looks so good. I love
Yeah.
that interior.
Yeah. Agreed.
Mhm.
I mentioned earlier about George referencing some things that happened, but he always also builds in references to other franchises, other films that he loves, that influence him. And the one I wanted to mention here is actually The Godfather, of all things.
Mhm.
And it's the scene where Palpatine is declaring the Empire to be born that day, and then Anakin's off doing his dirty work, killing all of the enemies, all of the separatist leaders and things like that. So he said that scene was really meant to kind of reference The Godfather and the scene, where the baby's being christened
Mhm.
as all of the enemies are being killed. And he actually said that the Empire, that the Emperor is doing the worst of the two, between him
Yeah.
and Anakin.
Mhm.
Between Anakin murdering everybody and Palpatine claiming an empire,
Pulling all the strings and
he said that
you know.
the Emperor is actually doing the worst of those two acts.
Mhm.
And then my favorite lightsaber battle from the prequels, Ewan and Hayden, they said that they went at it so hard on that, and they actually enjoyed that a lot without the dialogue. And I think you can tell. I think you can tell how much passion was in that fight from those
Yeah,
two.
it's amazing.
Yeah, just watching them go at it,
Mhm.
I think that's one of the things that elevates it to that level for me in the
Yeah.
prequels is that, and you can tell that they both just put 150% of themselves into that fight. They said that they actually had to go through different materials for their blades so that they got something that
Didn't
they
break
wouldn't
'em.
destroy. Yeah. They went
Yeah.
through bamboo, they went to metal, and they would bend the metal, and they ended up settling on carbon fiber for something that wouldn't bend or break.
It's definitely one of the more intense, aggressive
Yeah,
duels that we see in Star Wars.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's see here. We could probably move on to technology at this point.
Mhm.
Um, and getting back to the things that I never knew were digitized, there's a number of digital Anakins, Obi-Wans, and R2-D2s in the opening Battle Coruscant segment. And then also Christopher Lee was digitally replaced a lot, at least his head, which
Yeah.
wasn't aware of, but now that I'm looking for it, I can see it,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
They only had Christopher Lee, I believe they said, for one day at that point. And
Mhm.
so his stunt double did a lot of that fight, and then if you look closely, you can kind of see where they digitally replaced
Mhm.
Christopher Lee's head into that fight. Um, and then obviously, definitely things like him triple jumping off of the
Right.
off of the balcony. That's
He didn't do that.
no.
That's all right.
But I mean, I said this last week, but I want to say it again. I think that's a lot of the credit, credit to these guys that put this together. That I've gone 15 to some 20 years without knowing, that a lot of these things were digitized. So that's pretty cool. I think that's a credit to them for what they did, especially with the
Hmm.
technology at the time.
No doubt.
And then going, piggybacking off of that is Yoda's appearance has been upgraded in this movie. They've got some new skin rendering, cloth rendering, and hair rendering that they used. They said multiple times, and if you look even in the clothes and how they flow, and this is definitely the best that they've done as far as
Yeah.
work with that department
Yeah,
in
you
these
can
movies.
tell. Yeah, and I mean, there's even scenes where like when he's he like puts his hand through his hair, kind of
Yeah,
rubs,
right.
um, and they're kind of highlighting that, and then like the sunlight passing through the tips of his ears, kind of that transparency and everything, and um,
Right.
just making him look as real as possible.
Yeah, and one of the things that they mentioned, if you look closely, when he's in a situation where there's light around him, if you look at his ears, you can see, how kind of like if you, kind of like our ears, if there's light shining through, that there'll be a little bit like a translucent red
Hmm.
color. But that's something that they were able to accomplish with him um, uh, in this movie that they hadn't been able to do before. So, uh, yeah, looking closely at things like that, like you said, the hair and then the ears, how the light shines through. They've been
Hmm.
able to do some stuff with this movie that made it even more believable, I think, for me as someone that's watching this. So,
No doubt. By the way, I noticed that we had a question in the chat about how to pronounce
oh,
the Tantive 4 or the Tantive V 4.
I've
You know,
said
I've
Tantive.
I've heard it Tantive for a
Yeah,
lot of times, even though I would say Tantive 4 is how I would say it, just because
I
of, to
think
me, how it's spelled. But I have heard Tantive 4 quite a lot.
I started saying Tantive 4, and then
Hmm.
Cam is mentioning Ashley Eckstein pronouncing it Tantive in a book, and I've heard it other places too. And I started picking up on Tantive, so I've been saying Tantive for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but either way, if you say Tantive or Tantive 4, pineapple still belongs on pizza.
Either way,
So.
it's true. It's fact now.
All right, so let's see here. We've covered the clothes. Let's talk a little bit about let's talk a little bit about Palpatine turning into Sidious.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. It's quite a transformation.
it is,
You
and they
got the
talk.
glowing yellow eyes there under the hood.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
They talked about animating his skin there, and really what they're doing. They said that they're almost like a crossfading between this animated version of Palpatine versus the real thing, and mainly the things that they said that stayed that were real were basically his eyes and his teeth,
Hmm.
with the rest kind of being more animation than anything.
Yeah.
Um, so back to the realm of things that I didn't expect to be animated.
Yeah, I
His
wouldn't have known. I wouldn't have known
skin
that.
was probably
Hmm.
one of those things.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and when you pile these things together, I think that just goes to the credit of how well this animation was done. And
ILM is incredible.
yeah, very much so.
What they're able to do. I was surprised that some of the platforms and stuff they're standing
The
on in
sets
different areas, the
were just,
sets are
yeah,
digital. That was what I was shocked about, that I didn't really pay attention to or realize. But then when I
same
looked
here.
at it, I was like, okay, yeah, I can see how,
Same here.
you
Yeah,
know, yeah.
like you mentioned the sets, but not just the sets, but the furniture and
Hmm.
just anything that you can think of that you wouldn't that you thought were real, that were really there.
Right.
A lot of that stuff is
Might not
actually
have been. Yeah.
digitized, and
Yeah.
it's pretty shocking. Like that,
Mhm.
and I've I've not I've been one that knocked these three movies for how digital they were. I don't know if I'm going to do that anymore. You know,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
because uh, I think for me to knock these movies for being digital when so many things were digital that I didn't even know were digital
Mhm.
is almost wrong of me at this point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's only a problem when it's noticeable, when it feels like it doesn't belong. Like
Right. And there's a,
the
and
whole idea behind using digital effects and everything is to convince the viewer that it's real. You know what I mean? So when you can do that, fantastic. But
yeah,
um, the only problem arises when
when
you
it's
know
not. Yeah,
you can
sure.
tell. Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
But I think really because there's only a few times where I ever pick out things that don't look quite right,
Hmm.
and so that
Yeah,
means that the
I think
overwhelming
overall it's fantastic. Like the
yeah,
majority of it is
right.
great. You
Yeah,
know.
so that means for the overwhelming majority of those three movies, they convinced me. They did what they set out to
Yeah.
do,
Yep.
and I
Hmm.
didn't find out until we started doing this podcast, that I've been duped all along.
Right. Same here. Same here.
So,
They got me.
so for me, I think that means that it works. I mean, I still prefer definitely things like, like you mentioned with practical effects,
Hmm.
or especially now that we have the volume,
Yeah.
something like that.
Because
That's
they're in the volume, they're building the sets and having the
Mhm.
surroundings and the backgrounds being
Right,
kind of
right.
digital.
Yeah, and as Cam says in chat, George was always 10 years ahead, and he was.
Hmm.
He did, like you mentioned with Terminator, he did stuff back in 2000, early 2000s that some are still struggling to keep up with even today. So,
Hmm.
absolutely. Anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up episode 38?
No, I've really enjoyed this one too. Revenge of the Sith is
Yeah.
also my favorite of the prequels, and
Mm.
I always look forward to going back and revisiting that movie, and it was kind of enlightening to discover some of the things that were digital that I wasn't aware
Yeah,
of.
absolutely. That was for me. That was
Hmm.
also the most fun part of
Hmm.
doing this section of Thank the Maker is
Yeah.
realizing, like I said before, how much was digitized that I never knew until now. So
Right.
that was the most fun for me as well. All right, let's head into our wrap up section.
I'm just glad you're here. At the end.
Thank you everyone for tuning in to episode 38. We hope you enjoyed our Thank the Maker of Revenge of the Sith. We've been looking forward to this one, or at least I know I have, since we started this. So glad you all tuned in. I want to say a quick thank you to everyone that I saw in chat today, which was Mr. Rez, Vader's Girl 21, Semperfi Danny, Roar Farm Boy, 2Med2, Stephen Miller, Brittany from the Bosch blog, Ro from Scarif Scuttlebutt and the Red 5 Network, Rick Villanueva, Radio Rebellion, and I think that covers everybody. Like I said before, Cam Ray was here. I didn't write him down yet, but Cam Ray was here, and happy birthday again to Cam Ray. If I missed anyone else, I apologize, but I appreciate you being here. Josh and I both thank you for tuning in. Remember to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you're on one that lets you leave a review, we would appreciate that. Helps us get out to more people and have more people find out what we're about here and join in the fun. Check out the website from a certain point of view.com. Our socials are Twitter, certain POV pod, Facebook from a certain point of view. The Discord server, the link is always in the show notes or on the website. Our email address is certainpovpod@gmail.com, and our episodes are hosted by anchor.fm, where you can leave us a 60-second voicemail. We would love to hear your thoughts, questions. If you want to comment on anything, and not even just this week's show. If you're listening to an older show and want to throw in a voicemail for that, we would love to play it on the show as well. Remember to check out red5network.com. There's a ton of great podcasts there on the Red 5 Network. We're very happy to be a part of them. Check out the website for all the other podcasts. Make sure you follow socials for that as well. On Twitter, there are the Red 5 Network. There's a lot of stuff there, and not just us. There's a lot of great shows that we love to listen to. So make sure you're joining in the fun and listening to the other shows on the network as well. You can find me on the internet, mainly on Twitter at the Gauze85. That's where I do all my other Star Wars stuff and non-Star Wars stuff as well. So, Josh, where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Twitter at JediJarJar1722 and writing articles for StarWarsNewsNet.com. And once again, we just want to thank you so much for joining us today, either in the live chat or watching later or listening later. We just so appreciate every single one of you. And next week, we're looking forward to discussing the psychology of Anakin Skywalker, and be on the lookout for a poll related to Revenge of the Sith. And until next time, just keep in mind that everything we said today was true.
From a certain point of view. Tell you what, while I have you here, I want to go back because I miss Michelle. So I'm going to go back, and I miss Michelle and Cam through that thank you. So I'm going to do that again.
Okay.
Hold on, let me pull up my... All right. I'm gonna just redo that, and then I'll be done. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to episode 38 of the podcast. We hope you enjoyed our Thank the Maker talk on Revenge of the Sith. We've been looking forward to this. I know I have for a while. So thank you for tuning in. And I want to say thank you to everyone in chat. I saw Vader's Girl 21, Mr. Rez, Semperfi Danny, Roar Farm Boy, 2Med2, Stephen Miller, Brittany from the Bosch blog, Roe from Scarif Scuttlebutt and the Red 5 Network, Rick Villanueva, Radio Rebellion, Cam Ray, and Michelle Smith from Force of Light Entertainment. Okay. That should do.
Sounds good.
Cool. Dang it, RFB. It just threw another one in.
What?
Son of a... I was writing these down as I went, but then as we started talking about Revenge of the Sith, and I stopped writing them down as people were coming in.
Gotcha.
All right. I'll do this one more time.
Do it again? All right.
Yeah, I'll do it one more time. You guys got 3 thank yous today, so...
Extra thank yous today.
Yeah. Black Squadron. All right. And here I was trying to keep a list this week, so I didn't have to do this and still messing it up. All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed episode 38. I know I've been looking forward to this episode for a little while since we started Thank the Maker, so I had a lot of fun chatting about Revenge of the Sith. I want to say thank you to everyone I saw in chat this week, which would be Mr. Rez, Vader's Girl 21, Semperfi Danny, Burl Farm Boy, 2Med2, Stephen Miller, Brittany from the Bosch blog, Roe from Scarif Scuttlebutt and the Red 5 Network, Rick Villanueva, Radio Rebellion, Cam Ray, Michelle Smith from Force of Light Entertainment, and the Black Squadron podcast. If I missed anybody, I am very sorry, but Josh and I both very much appreciate you tuning in, and we hope to see you next week as well.
I think you got it this time.
I think we got it this time. Did we get it?
Got it. We got it.
Thank you, RFB. I appreciate it. All right. And let's see here. Unofficial moderator, yeah. All right. Remember, everyone, let's see here. 2Med2 looks like they're going live at 3:30, and then Radio Rebellion at 5, Scarif Con tomorrow at 2. And I think that covers everyone that I know of. Cool.
Awesome.
All right. I think I'm gonna wrap it here. I have to go. I have to go do some tech support for my aunt. So
Always doing some tech support, aren't you?
yeah. Oh well, that's fun.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm gonna wrap up the stream here. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We appreciate it. Hope you all have a great weekend. And
Yeah, have a great weekend, everybody.
may the force be with you all.
Always.